Would you consider these disappearances natural or highly unusual?
How many times have you heard Bigfoot has supernatural powers?
Portals, multiple dimensions, they're all true.
This is scary, folks. How much you have been lied to over the years. They want to make you believe that it's a stupid ape or a gorilla. Bigfoot is a human hybrid, at the minimum. You get it?
I deal in facts. I don't make a lot of assumptions. You won't hear a lot of theories come out of me. Boulders and granite play a big role in this.
Do I believe in psychics? Yeah, I do. I know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but my research is pretty darn thorough. Big hairy Indians back of ape tail. You don't find Indians completely covered in hair. I was divorced, and I have 50-50 custody, 1 week on, 1 week off.
I'm in this place in life where I have some extra time.
Have we found giant bones? Well, yes, we have. This was in a local paper. To think that it's not true is ridiculous. UFOs have been with us for thousands of years. Come on, folks, wake up.
It's essentially impossible for him to get from the lakeside to 12 miles into the wilderness.
Elevators. Repeat. Do not use elevators.
It's the cabal.
Is there an extraterrestrial component to it? But at the same time, it seems like maybe there's a Bigfoot component.
Is there a connection between Sasquatch and UFOs?
I think so. Sasquatch is an interdimensional creature.
I don't think that's so loony when you look at the DNA.
That came from a Bigfoot. Look at this. We've been taught to think in very conventional physics terms. But what if physics really has a lot more to it than what we learn in school? The intersection of faith, religion, and UFOs, you can't ignore it.
Are we coming to a period where there's going to be a grand revelation?
Our DNA cannot be random chance. Blue Eyes said it looked like a white child. Remember these descriptions, folks. We're building. Keep with me.
For some reason, all of the hunters who disappeared, every one of these hunters is German. What? Everyone is German. I wrote about a series of physicists who disappeared around the world. Everybody who disappeared was of German descent.
1944, 1945, this advanced flying object was associated with our battle in Germany.
The entity that came and met him was dressed all in black. They have some ability to differentiate, say, a Hispanic person, a Negro person, and a German person.
Fairies. Fairies and little people.
Uh-huh.
And I've actually written about that in some of my books.
Once upon a time, little Johnny Schultz, AJ, Germanic descent, excellent grades in school, was hiking in northern Montana with his father, Hans Schultz, also of Germanic descent. As Hans later described it to investigators, what was supposed to be a grand male-bonding wilderness adventure, as is the ancient Bavarian tradition, unfortunately turned into tragedy. Around 4 in the afternoon, the two good old German boys came upon a wide meadow teeming with granite boulders and berry shrubs. Just then, little Johnny called out, "I can hear a rustling river, father," and he dashed off in search of it. The father protested, but the boy scurried off unperturbed, and his short stature quickly disappeared into the tall grass. And that, my dear friends, will be the last time anyone would see little Johnny Schultz. Alive, that is. A terrible storm soon rolled in, but that didn't stop a meticulous search party from quickly being dispatched. Night vision, choppers, psychics, dowsers, the whole 9 yards. 100 men sifted through neck-high bogs, crossed thickets of thorns and briars, and dredged every bend of that river. Dogs never even caught a scent. Nothing. Except one thing. Down by the riverbank, they found Johnny's clothes neatly folded, delicately placed on a boulder. A month later, a fisherman would find Johnny's body, washed ashore totally naked, near the bank of the river, about 10 miles from where he was last seen, in an area that had already been searched 6 ways to Sunday. Coroners couldn't determine the cause of death. To the untrained ear, this story may sound like a typical case of some unsupervised child getting swept away by the unwavering forces of nature. But those of us who are, let's say, in the know, might not be so quick to lube up that rusty old Occam's razor. You see, what really happened was, little Johnny had no trouble finding the river. It even had a natural swimming hole where the current became gentle. But as he was enjoying the bountiful gifts of nature, he was also being hunted. For this was no mere swimming hole. Little Johnny had inadvertently intruded on Bigfoot territory. This swimming hole was actually an entrance to the Bigfoot's magical underground water highway system, which they used to travel throughout the Ogallala Aquifer by shrinking their advanced spacecraft down to the size of a peach and flying in and out of wells and into outer space. The Bigfoots had been monitoring Johnny from their craft, and the moment they were certain he was totally alone, they activated a portal, which uses futuristic technology to vibrate the nearby quartz and the granite, thus bending space-time to create a wormhole just big enough for a young German boy. Johnny was teleported to the craft, where he met the entities, descendants of the biblical Nephilim, who have been breeding with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, high-IQ Germans for centuries. So naturally, they far surpass us in math, physics, and techno-music. The entities conducted a series of tests on Johnny to see if his genes were fit for breeding with their superior race. High IQ, Aryan roots, Johnny's DNA was looking sharp. There was just one small problem. Although Johnny was but a young Kleiner, the Bigfoot already could detect that the boy was infertile. Yet Johnny could never reproduce, and thus was of no use. The Bigfoot walked out of there with a disappointed look on his face and told Johnny he was going back down. But in that brief moment before the door closed, Johnny caught a glimpse of something amazing. The interdimensional space harem of beautiful demi-human Bigfoot birther girls, all just waiting to be bred by a smart white man with good genes and potent sperm. Johnny knew the kids at school would never believe this. And without even a Bigfoot goodbye, another portal opened around him, and just as easy as he teleported onto the craft, Johnny was teleported back down to Earth. Unfortunately, the portal was miscalculated. Johnny plunged 750 feet off the ridge, which killed him instantly.
Hi there, folks. How y'all doing tonight? My name is Paulides, and I'd like to welcome you to my humble campfire. Pull up a stump and lend an ear. I hope you enjoyed my little story. I'll tell you what, even just recounting it myself makes me a bit scared to be out here in the woods all alone. So I'm mighty grateful for your company, stranger. Oh, you want to know if the story of little Johnny Schultz is true? Well, doesn't really matter. Strange things like that are happening all the time. But I'll let you in on a little secret. S'mores taste a whole lot better when you pair them with a tall tale. No, I don't hide the fact that I often stretch the truth for the sake of a good story. But not everyone is so honest about their lack of verisimilitude. Take my arch nemesis, the Wario to my Mario, Dave Paulides of the Can-Am Missing Project and progenitor of the Missing 411 oeuvre. Oh, you don't know Dave? Oh Lord, yes sir, the story of old Dave Paulides is truly one for the ages. What's that? You want to hear it, do ya? Okay, call me Chaps Cowpoke. I'll give you every gory detail. Grab a marshmallow and set that sucker to low and slow, because the story of Dave Paulides and Missing 411 is a long, strange trip. But this story is 100% true. No, not 100% true. It's 411% true. In general, Missing 411 refers to the theory that there is an epidemic of unexplainable disappearances occurring throughout North America, primarily in national parks and near large bodies of water. Proponents of Missing 411 believe that these disappearances are intrinsically linked by a common cause, and that the culprit is outside the scope of our current scientific understandings. These cases are so improbably similar and so impossible to explain that only something like portals, supernatural entities, or magic could sufficiently account for the Missing 411 dataset. That's the claim anyway. So, I just gave you my personal attempt at an academic definition, but Missing 411 can mean different things to different people. Did you mean Missing 411, the hit book series? Missing 411, the hit movie franchise? The Can-Am Missing Project, aka the Missing 411 YouTube channel? Or even Vanished, a Missing 411 story, the hit History Channel TV documentary? The Missing 411 cinematic universe is truly expansive. So expansive, in fact, that I pretty much guarantee that even the most die-hard Missing 411 fanatic hasn't consumed all of the material. Once you've read a couple of these things, you pretty much get the idea. All of these books and movies basically boil down to encyclopedic compilations of missing person cases, and then usually a little tidbit of analysis from Dave after the fact as to why that particular case is so dang unexplainable. Notably missing from everything in the official Missing 411 canon is any hypothetical explanation for any of these cases. And if this media multiverse is akin to Marvel, then the Stan Lee of the Missing 411 universe is undoubtedly our good friend, Dave Paulides.
Hey, Dave Paulides again for the Can-Am Missing Project. Thanks for being here.
I grew up in California, in the Bay Area. I spent 20 years in law enforcement, municipal law enforcement for San Jose Police, and eventually ended up moving to northern Montana, where I am now, and it's very cold, by the way. It's about -2 degrees outside. During that process, I got involved in some missing persons work. And I was told about this when I was doing peripheral research on another topic in a national park. And a couple of national park rangers came to my room after hours and talked to me about a series of disappearances that they had in their park. And they said, you know, Dave, somebody ought to look into this because something strange is going on.
Now, it's either a giant hoax, which we don't think, or it's something very true and real.
So, the origin story here is that Dave was hiking in a national park one day and was approached by 2 Forest Service workers who confided in him that, well, basically the premise of Missing 411, that people are mysteriously vanishing in the woods in unexplainable ways, and it's all a big conspiracy. I will say that it's a bit odd that these anonymous whistleblowers only ever came to Dave with this story. I mean, after all, Dave was just some random guy, a retired city cop with no specific professional knowledge of national parks or missing person cases. But well, for whatever reason, these unnamed, unseen Forest Service workers who haven't whistleblown again the decades since to anyone else decided to come to freshly divorced and in search of a hobby, Dave Paulides. And what a fateful, career-making, and highly lucrative whistleblow it turned out to be. So, with all his new free time and having heard his heroic call to action, Dave dedicated himself to investigating cases of missing people. But no, not the boring, regular missing person cases. There's like hundreds of thousands of those every year. But no, in order for Dave to justify expending his valuable brain power on a missing person case, it has to rigorously fit his set of so-called profile points, which is the skeleton that holds Missing 411 together.
Because they all fit the specific profile that I write about. And I don't write about just general missing person cases. It has to fit this profile.
8 years and 8 books later, I've now researched 1,200 cases that fit the profile we are about to examine.
Okay. So each and every one of the cases outlined in the Missing 411 media multiverse is united by these profile points. How did Dave arrive at these? Well, he never really reveals that methodology. He just tells us to trust him. He spent a lot of time on this and, well, that's what he came up with. Good enough for me. So we move on, taking the profile points as an axiomatic presupposition. Of course, his Missing 411 profile points do share a striking similarity to his Bigfoot profile points. Oh, did I not mention that? Before Dave embarked on Missing 411, his previous effort was a franchise of Bigfoot books. Yeah. And in those books, he also has profile points. For example, an association with berries isn't an official Missing 411 profile point, but it's something he highlights all the time as being highly important.
Well, the family took a berry picking trip to St. Vital, and they went to go get blueberries. I wrote about an entire series of berry pickers that disappeared.
And it's directly lifted from his book, Tribal Bigfoot. Same story for the near water profile point. So that's your first clue here, ladies and gentlemen, that Bigfoot is going to come into play. But oh no, it's not just Bigfoot. This is advanced Bigfoot.
They said that the Silatic tribe, the Bigfoot, have their own language, and they traded with them. So, sounds like people to me. Some of the more unusual things about Bigfoot are what he saw: electrical charges, electricity related to it. There was no mention there of hair on the body. When people describe a Bigfoot, sometimes they describe it as though the head never moves. When you and I run, our head goes like this, top of our head as we run. Bigfoot head stays. And it's been said that it's almost as though it's moving, but it's not touching the ground. And this is an article in 1883 that says essentially the same thing. And when I started to look at the Bigfoot researchers in the world, and I started to hear some of them say, oh yeah, there's nothing supernatural about these, there's nothing paranormal, they're just big apes, big gorillas. None think it's a highly intellectual biped similar to a human or human. Nobody ever says it. I was the only one presenting the correct side of the Bigfoot equation. You now have empirical evidence that Bigfoot is a human hybrid, at the minimum. You get it? So, have we found giant bones and giant associated facts in North America? Why, yes, we have. The Bigfoot tribe, big, hairy giants that can imitate sounds. They have bear and bird language abilities. They're harmless unless one of their tribe is killed. They will kill 1 to 3 of their attackers, and they have supernatural powers. Now, this was said in 1924. Friends, this was in a local paper. To think that it's not true is ridiculous. Sounds like a Missing 411 case.
Dave begins his very first foray into Missing 411 with the belief that there are Bigfoot living in the woods, and they are a hybrid of ancient indigenous people and magical giants. So, if that's your starting assumption, as you might imagine, it definitely does color his perception of these missing person cases as he reads them. Like, if you didn't already believe Bigfoot were out there in the woods, it probably would never even cross your mind that they might be part of these cases, especially since there's no evidence for that. But that's why we're so lucky to have Dave. So, with the help of these whistleblowers and Dave's unmatched ingenuity and Bigfoot familiarity, we've stumbled upon this incredible web of cases that may prove to be the most significant discovery, well, maybe ever. Cut to today, and Missing 411 is a huge industry with no signs of slowing down. Dave has collected a dazzling 1,000 plus cases that fit the profile points to a T, and therefore are supposedly inexplainable without evoking portals, interdimensional Bigfoots, or fairies. So, now you might be wondering, is it true? Are all these people being spirited away by Sasquatch? Well, no, but we'll get to that later. That's not important right now. For now, people just love Missing 411. It's got all the appeal of a true crime podcast, horrific stories of bizarre deaths, grieving parents, intrigue. And people just love Dave because he has this persona of a wise, fatherly cowboy reading you a bedtime story. But I think the real appeal of Missing 411 is that it's this game where we never actually solve the case. It takes the wisdom from shows like Twin Peaks or Lost. Once you solve the mystery, it all becomes boring. The people crave eternal investigation. The people crave open-ended Lovecraftian horror. The spooky thing you're imagining in your mind is always going to be scarier than whatever specific literary depiction some schmuck can conjure up. Dave Paulides carefully leaves you room to believe it's fairies, aliens, Bigfoot, the Wendigo, Elvis, or whatever else you want. Okay, so like sure, you can go to Mark Frost and he'll explain what the blue rose represents. But true fans know that the love of the game is solving the puzzle yourself in your own personal way. That's why Dave is always super careful to never actually say what the solution to the puzzle is. He's like the evil David Lynch. Lynch won't tell you his interpretation of Eraserhead because he wants to preserve the magic for your enjoyment. Dave Paulides won't tell you what he thinks is happening behind Missing 411 because deep down, he knows what he really thinks is batshit crazy and doesn't want to scare you off. He seemingly stumbled into this highly effective literary strategy. Well, at least that's my assessment. It is difficult to find out what Dave Paulides really thinks. In fact, Dave Paulides never actually says anything. If you listen closely to his interviews and talks, pretty much every single thing he says is qualified by something like, I was talking to my friend and he said, Dave.
What is most likely, let's put it that way, could have happened to some of these people?
So in one of these shows I was doing, I was interviewed, and off camera, I was taken aside and I said, this person, and I won't identify him, said, hey, Dave, I want you to think about this.
So I forwarded that to a few of my friends, and I got a pretty interesting response. And they said, well, Dave, I was doing a talk in Arkansas several years ago, and I was sitting next to a guy that was doing forbidden geology and archaeology. Brilliant man. And he was sitting next to me and his wife, and he said, Dave.
And he said, Dave, every month, 8 of the best physicists in the world get together and we talk about portals and multidimensions. And he says, 100% they're real. And he said, people don't want to believe it because it's scary.
Dave can never be wrong because he never actually says anything. So, sorry, Dave. But if you're quoting an anonymous friend and saying that you think he's correct, we're going to consider that the same thing as you saying it. I'm removing this defense mechanism. Consider it removed. I know it's you, and your girlfriend from the other school in Canada doesn't exist. This is you saying these things, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. It really is maddening listening to him speak. He'll say something like, I talked to a leading expert in portals, and he said that there's no way a child could have traveled that distance without portals. And then the interviewer will say, so do you, Dave Paulides, think that that child went through a portal? No, of course not. I would never say that. Huh? This thought only exists because you brought it into the world. If even you don't think that child went through a portal, then why are we talking about it? He's just placing all the dots and then cowardly refusing to connect them. No, I don't know what that is. I'm just asking questions. You're the one who've got a penis on your mind, it seems. So anyway, sorry that I already kind of spoiled Missing 411 for you. The correct answer is multidimensional Aryan Angel Bigfoot hybrids with portals. So that's Missing 411, a collection of ersatz encyclopedias of missing people and a weird boomer sheepishly hinting that they all can be explained by a Nazi space Sasquatch. Something you very quickly notice when engaging with any work in the Missing 411 oeuvre is that there is a commonality across all the books, movies, and YouTube videos, and that's what I call the Paulides creative method. Dave Paulides has found a way to brainlessly produce content in an all but automated fashion. The first product of the Paulides creative method was the book that started it all, Missing 411, Western United States and Canada, Unexplained Disappearances of North Americans That Have Never Been Solved. Catchy title, huh? Upon first glance, this appears to be a 300-plus page book, which would make Dave Paulides an author. but there's very little to no authorship happening at all. This book, like all his others, is quite literally just a list of missing people cases, topped out very matter-of-factly with virtually no analysis or editorialization. He's just scraping and paraphrasing newspaper articles, putting them together in a book, and selling it to you. Guys, it's just a list. It's like saying the phone book is an epic poem, and his other books don't even bother adding any of his own typing. Bigfoot, Wild Men, and Giants is literally just low-resolution scans of old newspaper articles. But not just any old newspaper articles. They are precisely over 100 years old, so they're royalty-free and he can legally sell them to you.
And the only thing this book is a listing of newspaper articles. And the articles went as far back as I could find them. That would be 1680, and I stopped at 1923 because of copyright issues. Now it's a couple years since then, so I could write a new updated version and include more articles, and I will. But this one proved my point.
This is the exact type of book that you could produce with a robot and no real effort. It's like the literary equivalent of drop shipping. Seems like he doesn't even read his own books either before he sells them.
I'm going to read you a couple of the articles right out of my book, Bigfoot, Wild Man, and Giants. There's lately arrived in France from America a wild man who was caught in the woods. He is near 7 feet high, covered with hair, has but little appearance of underflanding, whatever that is.
Dave, isn't this your book? Shouldn't you know what the words in it mean? The result of all this is that these books are totally unreadable. Especially because Dave refuses to offer any hypothesis or analysis, instead just pointing out trivial synchronicities between totally disparate cases. He'll spend 30 pages giving a Wikipedia summary of people who go missing, and then all we get as a reward for dredging through this boring technical summary is just a short paragraph that's like, I find these cases interesting because all 3 people are wearing Nike shoes. Like, huh? Is that all? He literally thinks it's worth noting in one case that 2 otherwise unrelated victims were both women whose first names began with the letter A and had 3 letters in them. To all my Amy's out there, you've been warned. It truly seems like his brain operates entirely on one function. It's just like a big metal detector, but it looks for words that he's decided are profile points. He just mindlessly scans documents until he sees the word water or granite, and then he gets a little dopamine hit and keeps searching for more.
Again, the Bird Eye Station, very close to water. Reinhardt disappeared essentially next to the river that flows through the Colorado Canyon. So, and Leo Gaspar disappeared in Pitt Lake. Again, water. And I think that's an important point here. Alabama, Puerto Rico, near water. Pay attention. That's what the object looked like that they photographed. Spherical object photograph over Mississippi. Water.
The same goes for his YouTube channel. He consistently uploads hour-long videos, the vast majority of which are just him robotically reading emails other people sent him, and then providing like a terse sentence response.
If you count not only people with straight German surnames, but also include people with Germanic surnames, the list grows incredibly. A much more complete picture begins to emerge. Sincerely. Bingo. Yeah, I've identified a series of people with German names and people from Germany that have disappeared that were physicists, but it's much greater than that, as exampled with this.
So at its core, the ethos of the Paulides creative method is about finding renewable resources of other people's content that you can process and repost with minimal effort. It's about quantity over quality. Don't think too deeply about any one thing. Squint your eyes and let the vague cloud of jumbled and botched narratives wash over you. As he advises his readers,
I want you to be like me. I want you to be a mile wide and about an inch deep. A lot of these stories out there, folks. And I gotta tell you, the more I read, the more I started to believe.
all of these books are meant to create the impression or the illusion that scholarly rigor has taken place. Defenders of Missing 411 often say, well, even if only 1% of the stories are true, that's still crazy. No, sir. If even one story was true, that'd be all we need. If there was any one actual real single piece of evidence for portals, Bigfoots, or angels, that would just be the whole book. How about instead of 50 different Missing 411 books, just do Missing 411 Definitive Bigfoot Portal Proof Experience? Why? Because there isn't any single case that defies all rational explanations or suggests supernatural intervention. It's the cheerleader effect. All the cases seem spookier when you put them all together like that. But when you focus on just one, she's not that hot. If I look up a list of 1,000 freak accidents and put them in a book together, people with terminal conspiracy brains will be like, those can't all be accidents. But yes, that's quite literally what they are. He just looked up a list of accidents and put them in a book, and your monkey brain is easily tricked by sleight of hand magic. 1,000 accidents in a row. What are the odds of that? You need to have this level of dumb thoughts and statistical illiteracy in order to be persuaded by Missing 411. Problem is, even if I debunk 20 cases, people are still left with the impression that there are others out there that still prove it's all true. When you talk to Missing 411 fans, they often conflate the most outlandish details from all the greatest hits cases into a chimerical, vague omnicase. They're sure they recall an impossible case of a child seeming to travel 25 miles in an hour, and he aged 20 years in a day, and his clothes were found 3 states away. But no such case exists. I promise. Go back and check. So, to sum it up, the Paulides creative method is a machine for dumb people to thoughtlessly crank out content simply by highlighting mundane aesthetic similarities. Something like this would be perfect for people, say, ages 0 to 3. You just gotta change the profile points to something cute. We can do a whole series, Dave. Cute 411, fluffy white things. Then the book is just a list of cute things, in this case, fluffy white ones. So like pillows, ducks, polar bears, arguably panda bears. Well, maybe we save that for Cute 411 Asia. But you see my vision. If you just make your profile point something fun, then this type of brainless categorization based on simple patterns that even a baby could follow, then it's the perfect form of entertainment for toddlers or the severely mentally addled. Speaking of which, let's take a closer look at the specific profile points that Dave uses for Missing 411. I'll tell you what, my Tinder profile points toward a cluster, if you catch my drift. Sorry. So again, the whole basis of Missing 411 is the idea that all these cases are linked by being geographic clusters and that they share uncanny similarities, or profile points. The only problem is, this claim is completely fraudulent. The so-called clusters basically correspond exactly to population density and popular national park destinations. So there's literally nothing out of the normal from the get-go. That's exactly where one would expect missing person cases to occur. And Dave never explains why he's beginning with the assumption that every Missing 411 case is related. It's probably never occurred to him that they might not be. He's just already smuggled in the assumption that a common cause accounts for all these cases, simply because he's put them all in the same book. The profile points are all red herrings. They're just an arbitrary starting input for the automated process to generate content. The profile points are just words that Paulides can Command F while he's at the library looking for things to copy and paste into his book. But let's go through them anyway. Point of separation, time of disappearance, boulder fields, near water, weather event, disability or illness, canines can't track, found in area previously searched, missing clothing, unknown cause of death, and geographical clustering. Without ever looking back, Dave claims that every case he's highlighted is linked by these specific profile points. But actually, the vast majority of the cases in the books barely fit any of them. And no one really cares. If the case feels spooky, or we can imagine that a German space Bigfoot did it, then it's a Missing 411 case. That's probably the more accurate single profile point that unites all the Missing 411 cases. Sorry, but boulders and berries don't actually matter, guys. But regardless, these profile points aren't weird at all. They also are pretty much exactly what you'd expect in a typical mundane case of someone disappearing. Like, people do go missing in nature all the time and always have, and these profile points just aren't rigorous enough to distinguish from the mundane. For example, one dumb profile point he constantly echoes is that most disappearances occur at 4 p.m.
The average time of the disappearance is at 4 p.m.
Do they? Of course, if you average the time for all missing person cases, you'll get some average. But is this relevant? Who knows? But hey, it's all content, baby. I guess because Dave highlights it, I guess now it's canonical that Bigfoot prefer to hunt at 4 p.m. Or I don't know. Are disappearances just noticed then because people tend to leave nature before sundown, and that's when they notice their person isn't there? He also uses the term disappear cartoonishly too. Dave Paulides doesn't ever distinguish between the moment people noticed their person was not there versus the actual critical moment of escape, accident, abduction, etc. He always says things like, they just turned around and he was gone. Like, no fella, he fell down the hill 20 minutes ago, you just didn't notice.
A lot of these cases seem to occur right at that point where two people decide to go separate directions in the woods. Why, I don't know.
There's something I call point of separation. Oftentimes, we as hunters go out with buddies. And after an hour walking through the woods, we say to ourselves, hey, guys, let's split up. We could probably do better alone. And let's, you take that area, I'll take this area, and we'll go out. That point of separation, it's almost as though something is watching, because right after they separate, something happens to one of them.
The point of separation profile point just makes me laugh every time he highlights this. Like, sir, if there wasn't a point of separation, it wouldn't be a missing person case. Like, is he saying that in other non-missing 411 missing person cases, there wasn't a point of separation? They were just always missing from the beginning? Wow, a key aspect of the missing 411 cases is that they went missing. Got it, Dave. It's just so silly. But remember, these profile points don't even fit the bill half the time. I'm issuing what I call the Missing 411 Challenge. Open a random page of any Missing 411 book and see if the case actually fits the profile points. Let's try it now. Okay, I use a random number generator to select a random page in a randomly selected Missing 411 book. I got page 182 of Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence. The case on that page is Shalim Augustine. Let's go through the profile point and see how he does. Okay, he was at a party on a boat where Dave Paulides says that he, quote, had a good time cruising the river and enjoying alcoholic beverages. Wow, Dave. Had a good time enjoying alcoholic beverages. He really does have a way with words, doesn't he? So again, point of separation is always going to be a free space. I literally cannot think of how you would have a missing person case without a point of separation. So this one gets a pass. Well, he says they normally happen at 4 p.m. and this one happened late at night, so that's a fail. This happened in downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, so no boulder fields. Fail. So the story here is that Shalim drowned and was found in a river after partying on a boat, so this one definitely passes with flying colors. No mention of any particular weather in this case at all, so that's a fail. No mention of any disability or illness either. The canines did track his scent, but ultimately still couldn't find him, so this is a fail. His body was found in a river a mile away from where they were searching, so this is a fail too. No mention of missing clothing. Fail. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, and he had a blood alcohol content of 0.323, which is well within the range of life-threatening alcohol poisoning. Fail. This is also a free space because no matter where a case occurs, we always can find a couple of other cases at some point in history in the same region or state or whatever. So that's a pass, I guess. The only real profile point here is near water, so congratulations, Dave. I give the case of Shalim Augustine an F-, and it seems painfully obvious that there is a mundane explanation here. I'll also point out that there's no mention of berries, granite, or quartz, and this guy was a Pakistani aspiring physical therapist, not a German intellectual. I recommend you try the Missing 411 challenge for yourself and leave a comment with your findings. I would be extremely shocked if anyone rolls a passing grade. And quick reminder to my viewers, do not look for messages from God in the gematria of your random number generation. Thank you. So as you can hopefully see by now, these profile points are typical of what you'd expect with mundane disappearances. But even then, they are applied with so little rigor to the point that the idea that these represent the foundation of Missing 411 is just a lie. Wait a minute, I've got another idea. Let's again use the Paulides creative method and his profile point logic to conduct more research for a new franchise. How about Kissing 411? Unexplained occurrences of kisses happening throughout Canada and North America. Profile points include chocolate, wine, Valentine's Day cards, and romantic pasta dinners. Clusters occur around Italian restaurants and scenic parks at sunset. It's cute and satisfies that same artistic urge I have to sort M&Ms by their color. But I don't think there's any mystery here per se, and I definitely wouldn't assume that a supernatural Cupid-like entity is responsible for all these events. Disappearances in nature, kisses, and fluffy white things all occur consistently and naturally in our big, beautiful, amazing world. But when you have the brain of a little child, the world can be a confusing place. Dave Paulides is a dumb, hateful, and histrionic boomer with the faculties of a mentally handicapped child. Whoa, stop with all the ad hominem attacks, you say. Okay, I hear you. Even if Dave has terminal dumb guy disease, it's not fair to attack him instead of the work. But because Dave never actually commits to an argument, I can't really attack any argument. But well, let's do our best. I'm gonna try to be as nice as possible here. Dave Paulides seems like an alright fella, and he's got a cute dog. But man, that fella is dumb as a bag of rocks. Listening to Dave Paulides speak, you will quickly be overwhelmed by a flurry of fallacious logical leaps, juvenile naivete, fanatical narrow-mindedness, and performative incredulity. Dave gives off major stuntman Mike energy.
I'm not a cowboy, Pam. I'm a stuntman. But that's a very easy mistake to make.
Come on, tell me you don't see it. Dave apparently has zero media literacy and doesn't follow the scientific method. He values folklore and anecdotes over science and data. He's just a bored X-Files fan. He's an anti-vax Facebook Karen trying to get you involved in his MLM. He speaks in flubbed Hallmark card punchlines and dreams in pulp sci-fi. He's pure ego, cognitive dissonance, and hair dye. If you go to his Twitter for like 5 minutes, it's immediately clear that Dave Paulides is your typical MAGA boomer, trapped in the right-wing outrage cycle and believing in literally every conspiracy theory. He's anti-vax, thinks the 2020 election was stolen, etc. Kinda seems like he doesn't believe in evolution and leans more towards young earth creationism. He also has a Rumble channel where he complains about how unfair people are being to Trump and how that civilly liable rapist, 34th-time felon insurrectionist didn't commit any crimes. We all know dumbasses like this. So while there's nothing inherently right-wing about these silly ghost stories, for some reason, Mr. 411 seems to especially resonate with people like Dave. In other words, delusional right-wing conspiracy theorists seem to be the prime demographic. But let's put a pin on that for now. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to poison the whale too much, but let me just give you a small window into the broken clockwork of his brain.
There's a family that enters the park, and their last name is the Key family, K-E-Y. Now, what's interesting about that is that this is what I think the key to the case.
Because as somebody said in weeks prior, if you spell dog backwards, it's God. Pretty prophetic. So that was an article that kind of blended over the supernatural powers of a wild man with a witch.
What if this person is either trapped in another dimension or trapped in a portal, can't get out, can't see, and is calling for help?
How many wheel struts did they find in the wreckage at 9/11?
None. None.
Did you guys hear that? Are things told to us in a dream that could become reality? And the answer is yes.
I will tell you this, the people that are willing to look outside the bounds of traditional science have been awakened.
I was at a conference in Arkansas, and I met a man there that had crystals. And we ended up having about a 3-hour conversation about quartz, crystals, and granite.
Could be a lot of things, I guess. Could be demonic. Some people will say they are demons. Okay. Other people will say they're the Nephilim. and see what a couple of segments of the Bible say that might be referencing a UFO. See these three protruding things on the bottom. See these three things on the corners on this object. It's like an X-Files episode. Really. He was told that the major religions, including Christianity, were programs created by extraterrestrials to prevent us from destroying ourselves while they ran experiments on us, and that they made us.
And he said that first series of the X-Files came straight out of my notebook.
There were robots in the room, and that somebody that looked like grandma was taking care of him. And he said that he thought it was grandma until he saw sparks coming out of her head.
I remember an officer telling me kids showed up at the Agassiz RCMP detachment saying that their vehicle was shot at. And I remember later talking to the RCMP officer saying that kids reported their headlights being shot out.
If he shot out somebody's headlights, and he was that good of a shot to shoot out the headlights, then he was probably trying to get attention to where he was.
I don't know if I would shoot at someone's car to get attention, because what's going in my mind is, oh my God, what if I accidentally hit someone?
Maybe that went by too quickly, but the situation was a guy was driving and his car randomly got shot at by a bullet. The instinct of Dave, this seasoned veteran investigator, is that someone was trying to get his attention by shooting the car? Does that make sense to you guys? It seems obviously wrong. Here's another example. Dave and his friends decided to go Bigfoot hunting. And after explaining to us that the reason why people don't normally catch Bigfoot is because they just treat it like a dumb animal instead of the intelligent entity that it is. So what does Dave do? Well, he smears a tree with bacon grease and McDonald's pancakes, and then wraps the tree with tape.
Any Bigfoot group out there that's in the woods looking for a Bigfoot, they all think it's a stupid animal. But we talked about how we're going to get this DNA from the Bigfoot. Just some regular packing tape, clear, wrapped it, sticky side out, around a tree. And we used a lot of different things. We used bacon grease, we used bacon, we used pancakes, McDonald's pancakes. Seems easy. Logic 101.
That's what a smart guy like Dave would do to try to catch another smart Bigfoot guy. Truly genius. I mean, hey, I'm pretty high IQ myself, and you'd probably catch me that way. Only problem is, it kind of seems like some prankster figured out what they were doing and decided to fuck with them by putting their own pubes up there.
In the nutshell, Bigfoot hair looks like pubic hair. That's the best way to describe it. Now, we would get the tape back, and this is what the hair would look like on the tape. This is some of the Bigfoot hair we got. And they all had the same sort of appearance as what I described, pubic hair. Now, we were getting pretty excited.
And okay, allow me to be a conspiracy theorist for once, but these really look like pubes. And he said he put them right off a popular hiking trail. And when Dave got them DNA tested, they came back as human hair. So I think one of his friends or some kids were just messing around. Which, bravo.
The results showed that the mitochondrial DNA was human. The haplotypes were human. Blast searches showed the sequences did not match apes, Neanderthal, or Denisovan. Boom! I don't know how else to tell you. That came from a Bigfoot. What can I say?
Meanwhile, in Planet Dave, he is happily fondling some asshole's pubes because he thinks he's discovered proof that Bigfoots are in fact human hybrids, and now he has the DNA to prove it. It's just sad, honestly. To play armchair psychiatrist, Dave Paulides really does seem like a child dressed up as cowboy Kurt Russell. Like, the LARPing element seems to be a key thing. Going into the woods as a kid was extra fun because we all imagined those spooks and monsters and it all felt real. Dave likes to hold on to that feeling and thus lives in a perpetual state of childhood. Participating in Missing 411 allows a perfectly pleasant walk through the woods to a waterfall to turn into a fantastical adventure experience. Which in theory sounds fun, but the necessary byproduct is a total disconnect from reality and paranoid anxiety around innocuous bits of nature. And that's another terrible thing about Dave I should emphasize, is how he demonizes the Forest Service and creates these toxic conspiracies.
The Rangers irritate the heck out of me. It's like a big secret that they can't talk about. Oh, no, we can't talk about that. I can't admit it. They don't want us bringing this topic up. Anything supernatural, paranormal, nothing. They want us to promote a fairy tale type existence in the woods here in the national park.
This is a good example of how being dumb can actually be like immoral and bad. Because he doesn't understand that the police track missing people, not the Forest Service. He is constantly accusing them of conspiring to suppress the incredible, amazing truth which he seeks to expose. The result is just more hatred and vitriol towards the Forest Service, which is like the only government agency we should all think is awesome. Internalizing all this dumb stuff just leads to bad consequences. But Dave is smart enough to hide his power level, so to speak. He always plays coy because he knows he'll alienate people unless he eases them into the Bigfoot portal stuff. This is a tactic often used by neo-Nazis to radicalize people without realizing what path they're on. Missing 411 is also a lot like Scientology in that sense. On the exterior, the public sees something nice, in this case a standard piece of spooky true crime media. Dave lures you in with these stories of unexplained disappearances, and before you know it, boom, Xenu shows up. But once you find out, it's too late. You already believe in Xenu because you've invested so much time and effort into that theory in the group. Like, for some, is it even damning for me to point out that Dave is crazy or a charlatan? If you believe in Missing 411, you're also probably crazy or a charlatan, so it's a perfect match. But it does seem like many Missing 411 fans don't understand quite how crazy he really is, and there are those who are going down the path and still have time to turn back. There's another angle on why Dave Paulides is a shitty person, and I almost don't want to go there, but it's worth pointing out. Dave's son tragically committed suicide, and I would never wish that on anyone. And this is something I really normally wouldn't talk about here, but Dave often brings it up in his official Can-Am Missing Project channel, so I think it's in the purview. And the only comment I will make about this situation is that Dave compares the death of his son to God himself sacrificing Jesus for the sake of humanity.
Since Ben passed away, I've had things happen to me. They cannot be chance. There's no way. There's no way. Is it related to Ben's death? 100%. Now, is that an angel giving me information? Is it Ben giving me information? I don't know who it is. But that information was dispersed to me. And these incidents happened to me since Ben passed. A clergyman told me after Ben passed, he said, Dave, I know you're broken, but you will be fixed. But understand, God gave up his son for us. And your son was given up for some reason.
Oh, so you had to sacrifice your child for the sake of the sacred mission of Missing 411? Or what did you mean by that, Dave? If this thought process doesn't perfectly underscore the delusions of grandeur and mystic Christian fanaticism at the heart of Dave Paulides, I don't know what else could.
It also illustrates in real time how we as humans use these narratives, whether they be fantasy, religion, or conspiracy, as coping mechanisms to deal with the truly difficult to understand tragedies in our lives. A child committing suicide is awful beyond comprehension. But if you lobotomize yourself enough, that tragedy transforms into an epic, cut-and-dry mission from Christ. Using these simplistic, grandiose narratives to account for complex or unexplained tragedies is like a super potent ideological tranquilizer. It may ease the pain, but it also makes you stupid.
If you can't provide closure in a traditional sense, and the incredible or paranormal may be tied to the disappearance.
At the heart of Misinform 111 is the fallacy that if we can't currently explain something, then it is also therefore unexplainable by conventional means, and thus any supernatural explanation can be considered.
When you've exhausted all of the rational options, you have to start looking at the irrational. When everything that's possible has been ruled out, you gotta consider the impossible.
Fans of Misinform 111 say stuff like this all the time, but it is of course technically not true. Listen to this very closely. Something can be currently unexplained, but also have a mundane explanation that we just don't know about. And we discover these mundane explanations for supposed Misinform 111 cases all the time. In the years since the original Misinform 111 books came out, numerous cases have been solved, all of which had perfectly mundane, earthly explanations. So when Dave claims that he filters cases so none could possibly be animal predation, well, now he's been proven wrong time and time again. Dave, if you're watching this and still not understanding the concept here, let me break it down real slow for you. So, what's the difference between unexplained and unexplainable? Well, when my wife finds out the last slice of pizza has mysteriously vanished from the fridge, that is unexplained but not unexplainable, had she been a fly on the wall and witnessed whatever may have occurred. But if that same slice of pizza sprouted wings and flew away, that might be unexplainable according to our current understanding of spirituality or science or whatever. So here's the bottom line. All the remaining unsolved Misinform 111 cases fit cleanly in the category of unexplained but not unexplainable. I promise, anyone who hasn't drank the Kool-Aid could come up with rational, mundane explanations for any Misinform 111 case. Dave is using what's called the God of the Gaps argument. He has this zealous belief in German space Bigfoots, just like the ancients believed in Zeus. And because they couldn't explain why lightning struck down from the sky, they created this story to explain it using their weird obsession with Zeus. And these stories are compelling up until we learn what actually is going on. You Greeks sure look silly now, don't you? Because there is a gap in our understanding, we can fill it in with some fantastical story. This is what Dave's doing. He gets to claim everything as a Misinform 111 case until we can prove otherwise. Sorry, Bucko, but you got it backwards. If you think it's German space Bigfoots, then be a man and defend it. But he never will. The whole game of Misinform 111 is just to make it seem like no worldly explanations exist. And Dave is happy to fudge things here and there to make it seem like that's the case. Once that condition has been met, you're free to enter into Cloud Cuckoo Land and there are no longer any rules. Dave's only job is to give you permission to believe in supernatural sci-fi things. Because we all want to believe, don't we, folks?
This is the one that was in Mulder's office. And yes, it is in my office. It has been for years.
But just because you've personally exhausted everything on your list of candidate explanations, that doesn't mean you just get to start making shit up. Sorry, Dave, but German space Bigfoots will never be on the list of candidate explanations. Folks, hey, we need to accept that in some cases, you just don't know. So, if Aryan space Bigfoots aren't on the candidate list of explanations, then what is? Let's stop and take a step back for a minute. I cannot stress enough again that when looked at as a collection of data, there is truly nothing mysterious at all about Misinform 111. There is nothing mysterious about Kentucky octogenarians with rifles occasionally dying in the woods. There is nothing mysterious about young, drunk college kids occasionally drowning in East Coast rivers. There is nothing mysterious about little deaf kids in California occasionally wandering off and getting snatched up by big hungry animals. If the idea of these things happening with some statistical regularity over the decades surprises you, then welcome to Earth. Random, unexpected, violent death in nature is a consistent thing throughout history and prehistory. As part of our very mechanism of evolution, there are dozens and dozens of ways to disappear that Dave never considers at all. Dave is so far into his own fantasy world that he never even considers like the top 100 most likely explanations for any given case. For instance, when asked what might be the most logical, rational explanation for all this, Dave says that our government is kidnapping us to experiment on us.
Okay, let's go through the scenarios of the possibilities. What could be happening? From the logical to the illogical.
So, start at the most mundane. People have stated that, well, there must be a group of American soldiers out there that are kidnapping these people and our government's doing tests on them.
Okay.
I've heard that 50 times in the last 5 years.
Huh? This is how far the Overton window has shifted in Dave's mind. We are so far gone from base reality that even his attempt at Occam's razor is a batshit conspiracy. It's just amazing the nonchalance with which he says things like, oh, sinkholes aren't possible, but portals are. This is how far removed from reality we are. What about, like, bears? If a bear killed you, dragged you to its den, and then it rained that night, well, that's pretty much it, right? No scent for the dogs, no evidence. That's a perfect missing 411 case. Come on, people. Let's turn up our imagination dials to 15% power. There's so many ways to die in the wilderness, both from natural and human causes. People die in national parks all the time from stuff like car crashes, bear attacks, mountain lions, fallen rocks, fallen trees, falling off cliffs, avalanches, landslides, boiling hot springs, poison gas bubbles, lightning strikes, hypothermia, heat stroke, drowning, medical conditions, gun accidents, alcohol-related accidents, falling over waterfalls, dehydration, intoxication, sinkholes, falling down abandoned mine shafts, bee stings, alligators, snakes, wolves, coyotes, dogs, spiders, scorpions, feral pigs, organized crime hits, insurance fraud murders, family dispute murders, other types of murders, or just slipping and falling and hitting your head and then being dragged away by a wild animal or whatever. People also like fake their deaths to go intentionally missing and start new lives and stuff. Dave claims that none of his 1,000 plus missing 411 cases could possibly have any of these explanations. He's ruled them totally out. Really, Dave? Have you? Well, he says so I guess we gotta just trust him. Bigfoots and portals it is, boys. Or is it the smiley face killers? So yeah, if you don't like Bigfoots and portals, you do have another option. The smiley face killers. Yep, there's actually a competing missing 411 theory, which is funnily enough also the inane brainchild of retired cops. Guys, somebody check in on the retired cops. The smiley face killers is the same basic structure as missing 411. Scrape missing person data, arbitrarily highlight similarities, and then hint at a fantastical unifying cause. But this time in urban areas. So instead of boulders and berry fields, it's smiley face graffiti that's supposedly found near the place where the people went missing. So the obvious deduction here is that a clan of serial killers are spray painting a smiley face after disappearing each of their victims. Right. It's interesting how the killer clan leave no evidence of their existence at all besides the most common and generic graffiti that's already everywhere. Like, folks, the mere fact that memes exist doesn't mean that everyone posting them is the same person. So, if you can't already see through the facade of this theory at this point, then unfortunately you do have schizophrenia, or the pattern-seeking part of your brain is just broken, or your desire to live in a spooky cartoon world to soothe the pain of life is too strong. All these smiley face killer cases cluster around young college-age men in Midwestern and East Coast cities drowning and usually being found to have been extremely intoxicated with alcohol and God knows what else. As tragic as it may be, there's nothing too surprising about freshmen passing away from alcohol-fueled antics. In one case, there was even a security camera footage of a young man drunkenly stumbling near the guardrail of a river before he mysteriously drowned, and all these grifters still try to spin it like it was a magical mystery. The smiley face killers is stupid for all the same reasons as Misinform 1, but it's more successful because the solution to the game being serial killers instead of Aryan space Bigfoots is far more believable and sinister. Dave kind of covers the same ground with his book Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, which is basically his attempt at something like Urban Missing 411, but even dumber. In fact, the Smiley Face Killers really is sort of a fan fiction offshoot of Missing 411, like 50 Shades of Grey to Twilight. But the Smiley Face Killers represent a threat to the hegemony of Missing 411 in the missing person conspiracy theory world. So Dave has to counter the narrative.
And if there was a serial killer out there, there would be bloodshed on the trail.
Right.
The other one that, a lot of people may think is true is that there's a group of serial killers out there in the woods.
Correct.
To me, that is the least likely of every scenario. Not that I'm categorizing anything, but some idea or the idea that people promote that it's a serial killer in the woods, there's a lot of things that go with that. And mainly, if there was a serial killer in the woods, then they'd have to carry that body for miles.
Dave always dismissed serial killers as a possible explanation for Missing 411. Usually on the basis that bodies are too heavy to drag, which doesn't seem like a strong enough factoid to rule out murder in most cases. But okay, whatever. Dave gets to decide the rules, and he does his best to make this cluster also be portals instead of serial killer cult. The key detail they quibble over is this issue of GHB being found in the bodies of some victims. But like all profile points in this shit, it's pretty much never actually there. It's all fake. But we just pretend it's real for the sake of engaging with the fan fiction. So GHB is a common date rape drug. So the obvious mundane explanation here is that these guys got roofied while partying and then were mugged or fell in the river or whatever. None of the guys behind either of these theories ever considered that angle at all. It's either a serial killer cult or it's portals. How is GHB related to portals, you ask? Well, because humans do naturally produce minute quantities of GHB, Dave basically thinks that these space creatures can remotely turn up the amount of GHB in us, thus incapacitating us in order to facilitate the teleportation process through the portal. And then we pick up where we left off with the breeding.
In 2 of the autopsies where the parents called for a second autopsy, they found extraordinary levels of GHB in their son's blood. And nobody could figure out how it got in there. Now, when I was a policeman, I knew a little bit about this. And GHB will allow you to stay awake. And you know what's happening to you, but you can't do anything about it. It's like you're paralyzed.
Is it considered a hypnotic?
Not really hypnotics. It's more of a paralysis-like drug.
Okay.
You can't respond.
Yeah.
But you're cognizant of what's going on. So if I take you in those conditions and I put you in a body of water, you're going to die of drowning. Mm-hmm. And every time I hear about a death in water where it's drowning under weird circumstances, I always think of this. Well, now here's the weird twist. Our body produces minute levels of GHB. What if there was a way to cause our body to produce GHB at these extraordinary levels?
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking outside the box, and then I had a couple of physicians and researchers call me and said, Dave, that's a phenomenal idea. Why couldn't that happen if we just understood why?
But it's all just so stupid. And Dave doesn't understand GHB at all, and he's definitely never done a single drug. He's just wrong about GHB. He says it causes paralysis. And when this weird QAnon influencer corrects him that it's actually a hypnotic, Dave is like, nah, Dave, trust him. Of course, these QAnon guys know their drugs. That's why they're like that. But Dave needs GHB to cause paralysis so it can explain the mysterious drownings. But like, isn't alcohol enough to explain an accidental fall into a river and drowning? It's just so tiresome. So now there's at least 3 of these phenomena, whatever you want to call them. We have Missing 411, the Smiley Face Killers, and Kissing 411. And they're all equally stupid, and we throw them into the trash. But not cute 411, white fluffy things. That one we develop. But wait, going back to Missing 411, surely if we zoom in on one individual case, then we'll find at least one little nugget of something inexplicably spooky. Wrong. Hear ye, I'm putting a $10,000 bounty right now for anyone who can bring me one Missing 411 case that truly requires a supernatural component, Bigfoot or portals to explain. Because every single one of these cases has a perfectly reasonable, mundane explanation, and it really is so boring to go through them individually. That would be to engage in genuine Missing 411 behavior, which I am loath to do. So, rapid fire, I'll go through the top 3 cases, one from each major Missing 411 film that are often considered to be among the best of the best.
One of the most perplexing cases I've examined involves a hunter named Thomas Messick, who in 2015 went missing in Northeast New York.
In his film Missing 411, The Hunted, Dave called the case of Tom Messick one of the most perplexing cases I've examined, which is funny to me because this is one of the least perplexing cases that I've examined. At the time of his disappearance, Tom Messick was 82 years old with a history of heart problems, near deaf and relying on hearing aids, and blind in one eye. He was left alone in the woods in the middle of winter for 2 hours when the others in his hunting party, who, quote, might have had a beer or something like that, went ahead of him.
Like, come out in the woods, we might have a beer or something like that.
Dave tries to frame Tom as a masterful hunter who never could have suffered a mundane accident. But it's also worth mentioning that the reason Tom lost his eye was due to a previous careless gun accident which resulted in a gunpowder explosion that nearly blew off his hand as well.
He had gunpowder blow up in his face, and that's how he lost. He had like 159 stitches in his hand, and he lost his eye that way. So he would say to these kids, this is what happens if you're not careful.
So this wouldn't be the first time, and that was Tom Messick in his prime. The day of the disappearance, his son described him as having one of his better days I'd seen in a long time.
Probably one of his better days I've seen in a long time.
Which kind of sounds like his cognition had declined to the point where he was also having bad days most of the time.
I mean, he had a lot of issues over the years, but never really seemed to slow him down any.
So obviously he had one eye.
Yeah. He was sort of blind. It wasn't really that great, but he could actually see out of it.
And hearing, there was an issue?
Yeah, it wasn't that great with the hearing. He needed hearing aids.
Also, the party with him was 3 other old men in their 80s. They estimate the nearest person was about a football field away through dense forest, and the son admits that they went into the hunt unprepared.
We treated that hunt like I was walking out here in the backyard. It was really nothing.
The search was made more difficult by inclement weather, and they said they went through, quote, terrain you wouldn't believe, including, quote, swamps up to their chests.
We went through some terrain you just wouldn't believe, swamps up to your chest.
The area Tom went missing, Lake George Wild Forest, is over 70,000 acres. Dave just doesn't understand that searches like this fail all the time for all kinds of reasons. That's not atypical. But for some reason, Dave thinks that search dogs just never fail to catch a scent unless something mysterious is happening. But like, if it rains, then it's over. So I know what you're thinking. Sounds like portals, right? Or maybe this is just the perfect recipe for someone to go missing by typical means. Maybe it was a medical event. Maybe he got lost. Maybe an animal got him. Maybe he went wandering near the road and got hit by a car or abducted and robbed. Maybe the family conspired to murder him and cover it up for one reason or another. Maybe the old man decided his time had come and he wanted to go out doing what he loved. Maybe he went off to pee and fell down a sinkhole and drowned in the swamp. Or maybe these tipsy, careless, and unprepared, yet heavily armed old geezers just made some dumb mistake and tried to cover it up. These are all perfectly plausible explanations, but again, even if you could prove them all impossible, you still wouldn't have opened the door to invoking magic as an explanation. If you think it's magic, then you need to point to evidence of it being magic. You can't just appeal to your incredulity and say, well, I can't think of anything else, so it must have been magic. Is there any evidence of Bigfoot here? No. Is there any evidence of portals? No. Here we have a weak, disabled old man knocking on death's door, out in the cold winter woods and swamp, surrounded by old men with rifles. Listen, I'm not Sherlock Holmes, so I won't pretend to know exactly what happened to Tom Messick. But it seems obvious that there are plenty of viable, non-supernatural explanations, and zero evidence to the contrary. And so what is Dave's assessment? Well, he really doesn't even offer an explanation, as per usual, or really any analysis at all. The only finger quote spooky thing he latches onto here is the fact that the FBI had a brief presence in the aftermath of the disappearance. And because Dave's worldview is based on 80s television shows, he knows that the FBI means aliens and monsters. That truly seems to be the only way to headcanon this into the official Missing 411 timeline, because Tom Messick is definitely not fit for the intergalactic fleet. Obviously, in reality, if the FBI were investigating, then that just leads credence to the idea that there may have been some suspected elaborate crime here. But Dave is so uncritical, credulous, and gullible that even if this was a cover-up for a crime, he would never know. In fact, Dave would be helping these people get away with it by asking us to suspend our disbelief. So now, let's do our profile point check and see what grade this Missing 411 case gets.
It's August. It's a warm summer month. Bobby Bicep was a 10-year-old camper. He was partially deaf, wore a hearing aid, and he liked to fish. Well, on August 15th at about 6 p.m., Bobby was fishing in the small creek behind the retreat when a counselor approached him and told him it was dinner time. Bobby acknowledged the counselor and started to follow him downhill towards the retreat. As the counselor was walking back, he turned behind him to look, and Bobby was gone.
The story of Bobby Bizup is prominently featured in the debut Missing 411 film. And quick trigger warning for you Zoomers, this one is a bit heavy. But like all Missing 411 cases, there's nothing spooky or magical about this one. Instead, it's just another horrific, mundane tragedy that Dave can sensationalize for profit. So way back in 1958, Bobby Bizup was a 10-year-old deaf boy who went missing from his Christian day camp and whose body was later found up in the woods nearby. To this day, we don't know exactly what happened, so that's enough for Dave to frame this as a supernatural mystery. But what he oddly fails to mention is that the guy who found Bobby's body was a priest who previously molested at least 8 other boys at the camp, and he didn't report the body missing until 3 days after he found it. Seems like that might be relevant information, but for some reason is strangely absent. Again, do we know what for sure happened? No, but it does kind of seem like a pedophile priest probably raped and killed that child. Yeah, it kind of does seem like that's more likely than portals. But isn't it easier to live in a world where priests are always the good guys and it's only spooky monsters that hurt children? This case reveals how Dave will spinelessly pick and choose which details to share with readers in order to twist the facts into something misleading. Same thing for the case of D.R. Kuntz, in which he failed to mention that the missing kid's grandfather's friend who came along was also a convicted sex offender. Isn't that a relevant detail, Dave? Both of these cases were probably horrific crimes that Dave is too dumb, naive, or greedy to ever consider. Dave proves himself time and time again to not even be a trustworthy source of the basic facts, which is literally all his books have to offer since they are devoid of interesting commentary. But well, disability is a profile point, so into the canon it goes. Remember, the entities only want to breed with pure specimens, so that's why they drop these degenerates back down onto Earth. More on that in a second, but for now, let's get this case's grade.
We have the Higdon incident, a hunter, German surname, hunting elk by himself, claims he's been abducted.
With the latest Missing 411 film entitled The UFO Connection, Dave has completely abandoned the profile points. Nothing about the cases featured in this movie fit in as a Missing 411 case at all. But instead, Dave uses these cases to develop the law further. So with Carl Higdon, we finally get a case of the final solution to Missing 411. Pun very unfortunately intended.
This guy showed up and asked me if I was hungry. Told him yeah. So this package of 4 pills drifted over to me, just like it was thrown at me. I took one. Next thing I know, I was in this cubicle, but it looked a lot bigger. There's 5 elk behind me. I said, "You got my elk?" He just looked at me and shrugged. Told me what his name was, Ozo. And they were down to get food. I said, "You guys always come down?" He said, "Yeah, we come down every so often. We get elk, deer from here, and we go to the ocean and get fish and take it back."
This is a drawing that Carl drew in the hospital, and the being had a hand that was a cone and no hand here, and his hair was like straw. And
So this is a very descriptive drawing. What are these little things?
this is kind of an apron, and it shows where the where the land is in his planet.
Did Ozo seem to have a personality?
He seemed to. Like, when he talked to me, his lips never moved. I mean, it was back and forth. But he seemed like he knew a lot.
What color was his suit?
Black.
Black.
The entire suit was black.
Completely black.
Carl's one of those people, God rest his soul, that I believe he was 100% honest.
Carl Higdon claims, and Dave eagerly yes-ands everything he says, basically that he was abducted for breeding purposes, but then returned when the entities, remember, Bigfoot, Aryan, hybrid, found out that he was infertile.
If it was because of the vasectomy, was the insinuation that if you didn't have one, you weren't coming back?
That's what I gathered.
So Carl insinuates that the entities didn't want him because his reproductive system wasn't intact. Now, if it was, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this story.
This is also where we canonize the idea that these entities carelessly drop people off cliffs, which ultimately Dave seems to think accounts for most of the deaths, which I just find hilarious.
And Carl says, I think they didn't want me because I had a vasectomy. And now here's the point to my research that's super important. Carl says he wakes up falling, hitting the ground, and rolling down a hill. I can't tell you, Mike, how many cases I have where people have been found where they've been dropped into locations that make no sense at all, where you and I would never go on a hike. But they were dropped indiscriminately and died from the fall. And one of the things I talked to Carl about is it seems like they didn't really care much about you. If they dropped you at distance, he goes, Dave, I hurt my shoulder bad.
These hyper-intelligent beings that literally are our cousins and breed with us, but they can't even be bothered to calculate the coordinates correctly to not kill us? When I breed with the lady, I always call her an Uber safely back home. But maybe that's just the southern hospitality that these Germans can never understand. Or maybe that rudeness comes from the Bigfoot side of the family. So anyway, Carl Higdon gets away with telling his story completely unchallenged. There's no evidence for anything he says. I don't know if I necessarily trust him with nothing to back it up, considering his story pretty much goes against everything we understand about, like, reality and science and politics and history and astronomy. Yeah, I mean, It just seems like obviously he's lying or stoned or stupid or whatever. I mean, like, Uzo? Come on, guys. Look at his drawings. It's like that leprechaun we saw in Alabama.
To me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All you gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun say yeah?
So based entirely on the mumbled testimony and second grade level illustrations, we now have a master key for understanding the UFO connection to 1,000 plus missing 411 cases. You got it? Also featured in that film, we get other insane, ridiculous stories from confused, bored boomers LARPing like they're in 80s sci-fi movies. There's a girl who sees a predator and another guy who sees the bubble shield from Halo 3. So just like Twin Peaks, Dave Paulides made the mistake of explaining the central mystery, and now it's stupid. Now we can all laugh at it. When the devil was hiding, it was much scarier and much more fun. So now, let's see what Carl gets for his case.
Oh my God!
I already know, you people are gonna say, well sure, those three are easy. But what about Bingo Malone, who flew across the sky 10 miles over Nevada? Guys, stop. Just stop. It didn't happen. So, is it portals or not? What? No, of course not. Let's do a little experiment here. Forget everything you know about missing 411 and let's start over from scratch. Okay, now let's say we have 1,000 new cases of people going missing. 1,000 people have gone missing and that's all we know. Nothing else about where or why. Let's create two competing hypotheses. The first one. These cases are generally caused by separate, mundane, non-supernatural explanations. The second one. These cases are generally caused by a singular mixture of portals and German space Bigfoots. Now let's test the explanatory power of these hypotheses. If they have the ability to predict, then we might be onto something. If the first hypothesis is true, well, what would we expect to find upon analyzing these cases? I will reiterate that herein lies the absurdity of the profile points. The profile points align exactly with what we would expect to find with a mundane explanation, not a supernatural one, right? Let's start with location. Well, where do people typically go missing? Not from Times Square or a packed football stadium. Or sure, stuff like kidnappings may be more common in these crowded areas, but if someone is gonna go missing, like disappear in the literal sense, by definition, there kinda has to be no people around. If it's a mundane explanation, we would probably expect these cases to largely occur, say, in the vast wilderness and large bodies of water, as obviously those would be the two primary places that someone might die and decompose without ever being found. And if the bodies eventually are found, we would expect them to be found within walking or driving distance from where they were last known to be, if these are indeed mundane cases of natural misfortune. If it's portals, I would expect these missing person cases to be distributed more equally throughout urban areas, or like all over the place. I wouldn't expect there to be any geographical clustering at all. Portals, as my sci-fi understanding is, can occur literally anywhere. I don't see why a portal could only be used in the wilderness. Dave tries to explain this by hinting that the natural quartz has some magical power.
There's a lot more we have to learn about water, granite, quartz, and missing people. And I'll talk to you some more about crystals, about granite, and about quartz, and about the charges that they can hold, and the important factor behind that.
While I do appreciate the effort from a lore perspective, it's obviously dumb because one, quartz doesn't have any magical powers that can create portals, and two, the future Aryan Bigfoot society would probably be able to move the quartz or whatever to wherever they wanted to go. Maybe with their magical shrinking flying saucer spaceship.
Because we've seen the UFOs and USOs condense down into very, very small items. We've seen them condense down so far they disappear. So if they have the ability to condense down in size, what's not to say they couldn't go down a well?
So in the United States, we have 64 geographical clusters of missing people that fit our profile points. As unusual as it sounds, right down the middle of the United States, there's an area where there are no disappearances. Several months ago, I got an email from somebody who worked for the government. And he said, Dave, that area of the US corresponds to an area which has been described by the US Geological Survey as an underground water area. It's called the Ogallala Aquifer. And he says, you just see if it corresponds with your profile map. Well, what we did is we overlaid that on top of our cluster map. It's almost a near match, which is interesting. Because of my background with MUFON and UFOs, I also know about underwater submerged objects. And those are essentially just UFOs that have gone to water. And if there was a way to keep yourself hidden, yet make yourself apparent at certain times, it would be by using the aquifer and going out through Wyoming.
Aquifers, underground water storage areas in the United States, could be hiding places for these UFOs, USOs. Bigfoot likes water. It likes to conceal itself in water, and it likes using it as its own personal highway.
So, because in my headcanon, portals can magically bend the fabric of space-time anywhere, you might expect a missing person to eventually be found, like, somewhere on the other side of the planet, or somewhere where they could have improbably accessed, like high up in a tree or within a block of enclosed concrete or something, or in the girls' locker room. If all the missing people are found within like 10 or 15 miles of where they were last seen, a length which pretty much any human could traverse in an adrenaline-fueled fight-or-flight panic, that seems like kind of a waste of a portal. We've really never come close to seeing an unexplainable distance here. It's always just Dave going like, I'm in really good shape, and even I doubt I could do that hike that fast.
How about a 4-year-old boy 45 miles in 5 days? Possible? How about a 4-year-old 40 miles in 4 days? 4-year-old 30 miles in 3 days? A 2-year-old 20 miles in 3 days? A 2-year-old 15 miles 3 days? 2-year-old 15 miles found in a cave. Lastly, a 3-year-old 15 miles in 30 hours. Folks, I'm sorry. It's pretty unbelievable in my book.
Sorry, that's not good enough for portals. On the other hand, if someone went missing in rural Montana and was found 6 hours later in the rafters of the Hagia Sophia, that would be what I would expect to see if portals were frequently sucking up hikers and dropping them off indiscriminately. Are they just shitty portals that can only teleport you like 50 miles maximum? Maybe we shouldn't be breeding with these weak portal losers after all. And how about this? If it's portals, I would probably expect there to be some evidence of a portal having been activated or physically present. You mean a real-life portal isn't going to bend the trees or leave a mark in the grass or something? I mean, the slip and slide killed my damn lawn after one afternoon, so I would imagine if a space-time portal opened near a popular hiking trail in a national park, it would leave some kind of impression. Some charred earth, some spherical crater of soil, some radioactive fallout. Maybe we would expect reports of people seeing portals. How come I never get to go into one of these portals? I feel like we would expect to see some empirical evidence of portals if this was something that was happening all the time. Of course, in Dave's world, there are magical portals that only work when no one's looking.
Some people may have the ability to open them, true. But one thing that Brandenburg told me is, Dave, the reason we know there's got to be intelligence behind this is that we can walk down a street anywhere in New York, San Francisco, wherever, and you don't see people disappearing in front of you. It's like a targeted response to when nobody's looking, something is happening. There's some intellect behind that portal to be able to understand when you're not looking, something's going to happen.
Right. I should also point out that this is why we never see rotting Bigfoot corpses in nature, because they bury their dead interdimensionally. Thank you very much.
Bones. We found a skeleton. We have found a skull. We found a den. We found where these creatures live, but not so with Sasquatch. They seem to just come and go throughout dimensions as they please. So to me, I do really think that it's an interdimensional creature, and there's a lot of things that are interdimensional. People's reports that have said the way that the Greys come into their life, the way that the Greys come in through their bedroom walls into their bedroom at night, the way that they are taken and then brought back, that to me is definitely an interdimensional occurrence.
Dave's cartoony sci-fi version of the actual Einstein-Rosen breach concept defies all scientific possibility. The thing he's imagining truly only exists on TV. If it's a mundane explanation, I would expect there to be a point of separation, where the missing person leaves to go off by themselves and is never seen again. You know, someone is left alone in the wilderness, gets separated, makes a wrong turn. If it's portals, I would expect there to be no real last point of separation. I would expect to hear stories of wives screaming in terror as they watch as a portal swallows their husband. I would expect stories of fathers struggling to pull their children out of ethereal walls of brilliant light. If it's a mundane explanation, I would expect the missing people to be elderly, people with health conditions or disabilities that might increase their risks of danger in nature. I would expect the demographics of the missing people would roughly map onto the demographics of national park visitors. If it's portals and they're abducting people for their high IQ, I would expect brilliant young people from the best universities in places like California or Taiwan or India. I would expect chess grandmasters, military generals, philosophers, SpaceX employees, Rihanna, Google engineers to be spirited away, not random dudes on holiday hiking in America. If it's a mundane explanation, when the bodies are found, we might expect them to be missing clothes. People take off clothes for a variety of reasons in wilderness survival situations. Hypothermia famously leads to people paradoxically stripping, or converting fabric into tourniquets and slings, or using pillows for clothes or blankets to sleep out in nature, or leaving behind heavy clothes to reduce weight for long hikes. Animal attacks might tear the clothes off. Someone might reasonably take their clothes off, fold them neatly by the water, and then go for a skinny dip before succumbing to something unfortunate. Also, sadly, rapes do happen, and that is something else to consider. If it's portals, well, I'm pretty sure clothes can also pass through the portals too, so I wouldn't expect the victims to be missing clothes. But again, Dave looks at the sci-fi film image of the ray gun turning you into a steaming pile of ash but leaving your shoes, so I guess in his world, clothes just can't go through portals. But you can keep doing this for every profile point and every case. Start with the hypothesis that it's portals, make predictions based on that, and see how far it gets you, which is nowhere. Do this again for fairies, do this again for serial killer clans. Do this for whatever you want, and you will see that your grandiose singular conspiracy theory explanations, supernatural or otherwise, always fail. Folks, with peace and love, you must understand something. Sometimes people just go missing. Heck, when my wife gets to nagging, sometimes I want to go missing myself.
When they were taken on that craft was that he said he saw a person in a Nazi uniform.
And the entity that came and met him was dressed all in black.
So as far as this kind of pattern where you have Germans being taken and then a German or someone of German descent, Carl Higdon, what we have here is a pattern pointing to someone involved in these in this UFO phenomenon that needs German genetics for reproduction purposes.
I would say that as of right now, the majority of any one heritage that's taken in our research, and I've researched about 5,000 to 6,000 cases of missing people. Germans are at the top of that list.
A lot of evidence pointing to the fact that there's a German space program that could be dated back to the Second World War era. And if that's the case, then we have a very intriguing data point for what you have been observing with the missing people.
Well, are they looking at Earth and watching them run around, and do they have some ability to differentiate say, a Hispanic person, a Negro person, Black person, and a German person. And oddly enough, in this one area of Wyoming, it apparently, somehow or another, it's going on. And especially that one group I talked about, the physicists, they're all German. That just happenstance? I don't know.
There's a German space program that's involved in colonizing other planets. Well, if they have a limited population from which to draw upon, whatever colonies they spawn might be threatened because of the lack of genetic diversity. So that would give us one rationale for why it is that these UFOs, these black triangles and other UFOs are involved in taking Germans, especially scientists, because they would be very useful for colonizing other planets or worlds in other solar systems if the program is advanced as some people claim.
Is there any other heritage besides German that's being taken that you've heard?
No, I really haven't. That seems to be the predominant one is the German that's being taken. And I know that's just from listening to you.
So yeah, this all goes back to Nazis for Dave. For whatever reason, it seems like Nazi mysticism is kind of having a comeback right now, and it's definitely hidden deep in there in this case. White supremacist mythology is the toy inside the Kinder Surprise egg that is Missing 411. But remember, because Missing 411 is sheer fan fiction spawned from the brain of one man, the Missing 411 universe has two key axioms that you may have guessed by now. The Bible is literally true, specifically the stuff about fallen angels and ancient giants living on Earth. And maybe the history of Germany during World War II is a little bit different than we were taught. What he's really hinting at is the larger Hyperborea conspiracy theory, if you know what I mean. It's all very stupid, so I'll let the experts in stupidity explain it themselves.
Have you ever heard of Operation High Jump?
I knew I was going to love this podcast.
No.
Dude,
What's
it's
Operation
crazy.
High Jump? What does that mean? He basically met with UFOs, Nazi UFOs.
What?
Yes.
Nazi UFOs.
The Nazis.
The Nazis had a flying saucer.
Had made a deal, basically, working with
What?
You've never heard this?
No.
It's the greatest story ever, bro. It's the greatest
So the
story.
Nazis made a deal with the aliens?
Yes.
Holy
For
shit.
technology, and the deal was they were going to work together, okay? And that's where they say Eisenhower made a deal with these aliens that they could kidnap people and do experiments, but they couldn't just do it anywhere. They had specific places, which were our national forest.
What?
Yeah, dude. You've never heard of this.
A core part of modern-day neo-Nazi mysticism is the belief that there was once an ancient land called Hyperborea, where all the uncanny valley AI-generated blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan people who were descended from the angels and giants once lived in peace and harmony. And this land may or may not be within the earth and accessible only through a hole in the South Pole. And their society was like Avatar, the blue people, not the enemy. And they had all the magic and alchemy and the technology that the CIA killed Nikola Tesla to suppress or whatever. And if you guys are familiar with this Adolf Hitler fella, you know breeding between different races was kind of like his #1 obsession. So I don't know, call me crazy, but Dave's Missing 411 theory kind of fits neatly into this larger Nazi mysticism fandom. This ancient race of secret fallen beings needs new healthy Aryan-blooded humans to breed with to further their race? I don't know, guys. Sounds kind of racist. I mean, I don't know. Everyone's entitled to have their own sexual preferences. If you're only into blondes, hey, whatever floats your boat, man. But it's when you start going, only blondes should be allowed to breed with our hairy angel overlords. That's when you start to lose me. Angels, if you're listening to me, take a black fella for a ride one day. You may never go back. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson is right there. That man seems like he could be a perfect baby-making machine and help you fix your rockets or whatever. But until then, I guess if the entities accidentally pick up a genetically deficient person or Negro, as Dave Paulides says, they will just throw them into the portal. So that's where we start. Dave is basically tapping into eugenics, Nazi mysticism, and fusing it with a touch of Native American folklore to create this truly horrible product. Missing 411 is really only like one step away from flat Earth and Holocaust denial. Another thing worth pointing out again is that the ideology of Nazism uses the same tricks as Missing 411. And this really again illustrates the dangers of why believing things because they feel good can be very bad. Dave probably doesn't think he's a Nazi. He's correctly identified that the Holocaust was bad, but he's well on his way down the same path. He just thinks the modern day equivalent to Nazis are like the World Health Organization or Disney or Obama or Jews or whatever. When you allow Fox News, Trump, and 4chan to distort your sense of reality and invert your moral compass, it is precisely that makes you a Nazi. By incorrectly identifying the problem as a group of people and then demonizing them, all while quite literally believing that white people are a superior race and that ancient wisdom guides us to interbreed with German physicists, all you're missing at that point is the black trench coat, which sounds like they give you on board the spacecraft anyway. So, am I saying that Dave Paulides is a Nazi? Yes. Like, insofar as Nazis exist in America, it's guys like this who believe in racial essentialist IQ differences and they must fulfill their ancient divine mandate by not having babies with Latinas or whatever. So yeah, it seems like Dave has been enraptured by Nazi narratives, but is just too dumb to realize it. I think he just thinks all this stuff sounds cool or awesome, represents a good way to move product. He's spreading Nazi propaganda because he likes the aesthetic and it's making him money. It seems to me that this is all part of the reason why Missing 411 is so popular with the conservatives. It's a ghost story where it's spooky and you get to be the superior race. Tired of your boring life? In Missing 411, there's a monster who hunts you, the Ubermensch, because it wants to have your babies. It's fantastical, it's kinky in a repressed sexuality type of way, and it affirms Nazi ideals. That's the perfect recipe for an irresistible meal for your typical MAGA bro. At the end of the day, Missing 411 is a brainlessly curated stack of obituaries for decent people that Dave has heartlessly strewn with fake Bigfoot pubes, crudely scribbled with pagan neo-Nazi swastikas, and put up for sale on websites for $25. It's the midlife crisis hobby of a delusional boomer with a desperate Neanderthal as his favorite TV heroes. The only mystery here at all is how people can see Dave Paulides as anything other than a clown. So, if you still believe in Missing 411, I have good news for you. You are in no danger of getting picked off in the woods, because your IQ is definitely too low for breeding. So I guess we can all take solace in that. Some of you may say, well sure, Missing 411 is a bullshit story, but is the harm really that bad? To be fair, Dave Paulides always insists that his fans shouldn't be scared to visit the national parks, and the safety advice he gives is generally good. But come on, folks. That's no redemption. It just makes it even dumber. Like, is carrying a pistol really gonna help you in a Missing 411 situation? What are you gonna do, shoot the portal, Dave? Think of it this way. If my otherwise competent deep-sea diving instructor was giving me tips on how to avoid Cthulhu, that kind of changes my whole opinion about his credibility. And in fact, it makes me think we may need those guys in the white lab coats with the big needles to take him away. But for real, I'm not trying to be mean here, nor do I want to ruin everyone's fun. I really do like a good ghost story, just like the rest of us. I love Lovecraftian horror, but we just gotta be careful about blurring the lines of fiction and reality. It's one continuous spectrum between Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, and Alex Jones on Sandy Hook. It's possible to take the verite quality of your work so far that it becomes destructive to you and society. I can relate to the fun feeling people get when pondering the unfathomable mysteries of the universe and positing improbably mind-blowing explanations. But Missing 411 isn't the way to do it. It's lazy, racist fan fiction that heartlessly chews up and spits out distorted versions of real human tragedies all for a buck while propagating Nazi mysticism. If you want cosmic horror, go play Bloodborne or watch Solaris or something. Go read At the Mountain of Madness. I think so many of these conservative men are so ashamed to admit that they enjoy fantasy escapism that they become obsessed with real-world projections of their repressed boyish desires. If you're super into like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, you're a soy boy. But if you're super into Bigfoot and conspiracy theories, well, you're a badass cowboy investigator guy. But to all my bros, it's painfully easy to see through this facade, and it makes you look even more childish when you treat life like an anime. Fellas, we don't need to be ashamed to be into fiction. If you love like Cyclops, that's awesome. I love that for you. But if you genuinely think Cyclops are real, then you're just another... Oh, huh? That son of a bitch was right.
Can you imagine if I told the parents, yeah, maybe they fell into a portal or multi-dimensions, they were taken away? I'd look like an idiot. No one would believe me.
Let's pretend we switch seats. You're Dave Paulides.
Okay.
And you've got a family that's been missing a child in the woods.
Okay.
And you try to explain to them how it could possibly be this multi-dimensional issue or portal. I can't do that. How could I ever explain to them what this possibility may mean?
You can only do it if they are already spiritual people who understand the spiritual dimension that is going on in our physical world. If they have that, then you can explain it to them.
Look, if we can open our minds and say that there's the possibility of portals, that could explain what happened to Carl.
Wow.
This is a difficult one.
Yeah. Don't know.
Another odd question. Did Mark have a vasectomy?
A vasectomy?
Yeah. He didn't.